G'day everyone. So about 5 years ago, I started my Bachelor of Science in Games Development at the University of Technology, Sydney, a degree with a primary focus on developing strong coding skills and also emphasizing good user interaction and design, with the assumption that you know absolutely nothing about games. I went into my first year not quite knowing what to expect, but it definitely wasn't what I thought it was going to be. A lot of the first year subjects were quite general and theory based, and to be honest, I found it kinda boring. This wasn't the type of stuff I wanted to do. I hated business, and some of the other subjects felt like regurgitated high school work. I wanted to learn how to make games, and I was almost a year through my degree and hadn't learned anything I felt was useful. And on top of that, because a lot of the subjects were based around general IT principles, there were a lot of students that weren't doing my degree. In fact, I met only maybe 1 or 2 game dev students in my first year, and I felt quite alone, to be honest. I was already second guessing whether games development or university was right for me. Thankfully, there was a saving grace: Introduction to Game Development. This subject focused on teaching students the basics of Unity, C#, and source control, setting up a strong foundation for following years. Fortunately, I'd already been teaching myself Unity for the better part of a year before starting this subject, and while some content was familiar, there was plenty of new stuff that I learned, and going over the things I already knew in a more official sense was also very good. The main project for this assignment was to recreate a retro arcade game in Unity and then add a unique twist. I decided to recreate Miss Pac-Man, and for my twist, I turned it into a 3D Escape the Maze type game. I loved this subject, and I was really able to push myself and do something crazy because I had a bit of Unity practice already under my belt. While the project could have done with a little more polish, or a lot, I was really proud of it. This was also my first time using Blender, and for my first attempt, I was pretty impressed. Now, there was a fundamental flaw. The game was way too hard. But despite that, I was still chosen to present my game at a UTS showcase and was one of the only first year students there, which was a huge accomplishment for me. I got to meet some people from the industry and enjoyed watching people struggle through my game. With a rejuvenated drive, I embarked on my second year. With most of the generic subjects out of the way, these next 2 years had a much larger focus on game development, and I was ready to meet more people from my degree and learn some new things. But the universe had a different plan and quickly slapped me back into my place because 1 week after classes started, COVID hit, and we were all forced into online learning. Now, anyone who studied through COVID, especially those at university or college, knows how much online learning sucked. Alas, I kicked off my second year with the first game subject, Introduction to Game Design. This class focused on the design side of game development and aimed to teach us how to develop cohesive features and make games fun. The core of this subject was making a level-based game where each level added a new mechanic to the game that worked with the previous mechanics added in earlier levels. My group made the game Psychoscape, a 2D platformer where you play as a mental patient named Rob, who uses his hallucinations to escape a mental asylum. I created the basic mechanics: running, jumping, wall climbing, and the hallucination swapping. In the later levels, my group mates implemented moving platforms, jump pads, and for a lack of a better word, movement cannons, a bit like the green bubbles in Celeste. I was responsible for designing the final feature of the game, which was fans, which either accelerated or decelerated the player depending on whether they were moving with or against the winds of the fan. The game turned out pretty well for 4 people who had never met, and we were also selected alongside another bunch of great games to present at an online showcase. We didn't win, but we got some great feedback and were applauded for our creative take on the basic platforming mechanics. Although, similar to last time, we were frequently told that the game was too hard, and looking back, of course it was. It's like trying to play Celeste, where you can only see half the level and have to remember where the other half is, and if you're too slow, you die. But these were all great lessons to learn. The next semester mixed things up a bit, and everyone was thrown into the world of Unreal Engine and C++ in advanced games programming. This subject focused more on the complicated components of game development, including procedural generation, online multiplayer, and AI. I had mixed feelings going into this after enduring a rough C++ subject that was collectively disliked by everyone who took it, but thankfully things were handled much better here and I was able to tolerate C++ instead of outright hate it. Everyone was given the same multiplayer shooter template that we worked on during labs and then partnered up to add upon each aspect of the game. I was able to work with one of my friends that I met in the first week before online learning, so it was great to finally be able to work with someone that I knew. The first improvement was to the enemy AI. I chose to build upon the basic state system by adding a fourth investigate state and adding unique behaviors between enemies based on their state. So if an enemy was chasing the player and they ran into another enemy, they would join in and both would hunt down the player. Or if two investigating enemies met, they would share information and spread out to cover more ground. I was clearly feeling optimistic when embarking on this, and while it might not have worked 100% as intended, it still gave a unique feel to our enemies. My partner added different surfaces to the game that affected enemy pathfinding. So if an enemy was chasing a player, they might go around ice or snow so they don't slow down, or if they're close enough, they might just rush through to try and catch up. The next area we had to focus on was procedural generation. I worked on procedurally generating the environment by creating buildings with random layouts that also connected to an outside area. I had a bunch of room types and they would join together in a grid-like fashion to make interesting structures. Random weapons and health pickups were also littered around the map to give each round a unique feel. My partner designed procedurally generated enemies that would have different health and weapons and get progressively harder the longer you survived. The last thing was final touches. I worked on adding some more variety to the procedural generation with new room types and more variety to the outside. I also gave the game a fresh coat of paint with some assets from Quixel, and my partner made this amazing X-ray vision shader that allowed you to see where enemies and pickups were on the map. We dubbed the game Canyon Clash because obviously alliteration makes a game better, and we presented our game at another online showcase with a similar reception to previous semesters. It was at this time that I decided to do an extra subject over summer break. I wasn't failing or behind, but I decided to do it to free up some more time for my major projects coming up in the following year that I knew I wanted to invest a lot of time into. So, during summer uni, which literally started the week after the previous semester ended, I took part in the Game and Graphics project, a subject that allowed students to investigate a topic of their choosing and write an academic report on their research and findings. I investigated the use of machine learning tools in Unity, specifically ML agents, and evaluated their ability to learn to complete a simple game of capture the flag during a given time frame. While I only had one subject, it was very hard to get motivated, with Christmas in the middle and also wanting to take it easy after an intense year of online learning. I was able to power through and deliver my report, but by the time the subject was over in mid-February, I only had a week to myself before getting thrown right back into the thick of it all. I don't regret doing it, but it did make it a very exhausting 2 years without a proper break in the middle to de-stress from it all. And that takes us to the start of 2021 and my final year at university. Thankfully, things had started to get better and we were actually allowed back into the classroom. While I might have been dealt a rough hand to start, I was finally able to experience that typical uni life that I was waiting for. This year had two main subjects, one in each semester, where we worked in groups and put everything we'd learned into practice to develop a game from scratch. We developed the game in agile style, working in fortnightly sprints where we develop and iterate on the game, and then present it to the class where we would get feedback to improve it. In the autumn semester, we had Game Design Studio 1, or GDS 1. I ended up in a group with my friend from Canyon Clash, one of my friends from Psychoscape, and then two other people we met from being back in face-to-face classes. The subject was open-ended and we could make whatever we wanted, but all five of us seemed to like very different genres of games and couldn't come up with an idea easily enough. To fix this, we resorted to the random wheel generator. We filled the wheel with about 100 random words. They could be genres, characters, themes, ideas, anything. And we would spin it twice and have to come up with an idea that included both those words. This got everyone contributing to every idea, and we voted on the one that we were most interested in. And because it was open-ended, we were able to get really wacky with our ideas. The two themes we finally settled on were Angel and Perspective, which led to the development of Project Angel, which was later dubbed Rescue Angel. Project Angel is an action puzzler where you played as the guardian angel Lucy, who was in charge of protecting her human Dave from injuring himself. You would move around every level, putting obstacles in Dave's way to keep him out of danger and get him to safety. I worked on the menus and UI, the level system, and the data saving and loading, as well as designing a bunch of levels for the game. This was great as I got to work on 3 areas that I hadn't really worked on before, and was able to add some polish that I normally wouldn't be able to, like menu and level transitions and reactive UI. I had a blast in this subject. I was finally able to work on a game for a consecutive 10 weeks, which gave us more time to execute all the ideas we had. But, more importantly, I was also able to meet so many other talented people in my course. There were a few groups in particular who became quite close and pushed each other to make the best games possible. At the end of it, we were chosen to present our game at a UTS showcase. The game got lots of good feedback, especially on its premise and creativity, but yet again, we were told that it was definitely one of the more difficult games there. Nevertheless, we finished the subject on a high note with a really well polished game that we were all incredibly proud of. This was it, spring of 2021, and my last semester at university. My final project, Game Design Studio 2. I worked with the same group from the previous semester, and since we were familiar with what everyone could do, we were confident we could pull our strengths to make a really great game. Being the final project of the degree and wanting to showcase our skills, everyone wanted to work on a certain component which helped shape the game. One person wanted to show off his engineering skills and make an online multiplayer game, another wanted to work on her art and level design skills in an ancient Egyptian setting, and for me, I wanted to work on my design skills. I'd made quite a few games throughout uni that had done well in the subjects and had made it to showcases, but every time I was told they were too hard. And the reason was simple. I kept making games for myself, but making and testing a game predominantly on your own limits your view on it. It gives you tunnel vision. I wanted my games to be challenging, but I knew the controls. I knew how the AI worked. I knew where all the platforms were. And that's what made all my games so hard. They were challenging for me, the person who made it, who was almost always one of the best people at the game. So this time, I was determined to make a game that was easy to pick up, but hard to master. Once we were all happy with all of these different factors and contributions, we were able to make our final game, Fury of the Pharaohs. Fury of the Pharaohs is an online multiplayer, third-person shooter where you play as one of the children of the recently deceased pharaoh who are fighting to be the next ruler of Egypt. The game had simple and common shooter mechanics that you'd find in most shooting games, with the addition that all attacks had knockback to add a bit of chaos. We also implemented familiar game modes like Free-for-All, Team Deathmatch, and King of the Hill to help get people in and start playing and enjoying as soon as possible. To add some variety, each of the 5 playable characters had their own unique abilities to cater to a variety of playstyles. Hekanu was our stealthy character who could turn invisible, and Kia was our quick rampaging fiend. There was a lot of restraint to not take the game overboard, and it sometimes felt like we were never going to be able to balance all the characters, but thankfully, with enough time, tweaking, and testing, we were able to finish the game. Then, for the final time, we were invited to the UTS showcase to show off our game. And people loved it. We had people playing all night and they were laughing and having a good time, and some people got really competitive too. On top of that, we were getting lots of great and positive feedback from everyone who tried it. Now it was time for results. The people's choice and the winner of the showcase. And the game with the most votes was... not us. But being perfectly honest, the loss didn't sting. After 3 years of struggling to make games that hit the mark, I was finally able to create that fun game that people loved, balanced with the right amount of ease and complexity. And with the help of my team, I was able to achieve that goal. And that personal victory and the great memories from that semester and that night are far more important to me than some little trophy. I might not have had the ending I'd hoped for, but it was still pretty damn special to me. And that about sums up my uni experience, although there was definitely a lot extra I had to cut out. I wanted to share this with everyone because I know there are plenty of people who are or were in my position at one point or another, and I know younger me would have loved to see something like this. Knowing those highs and lows are perfectly normal, feeling alone or behind or like you're not good enough or going to improve. Uni gave me the opportunity to explore my passions, and it forced me into a bunch of uncomfortable scenarios that I never would have dreamt of if I was teaching myself at home. Like everything, there were pros and cons, and I'm aware university and college are not for everyone. There's absolutely nothing wrong with teaching yourself everything from scratch, because it has worked, but to be one of those limited few people takes a tremendous amount of discipline. Out of a class of 60, less than 10 work in the games industry. Now that might sound bad, but there's something I find fascinating. It wasn't the people who had the best grades. It wasn't the people who won the showcases. The people who are out there now, making games, are those who wanted it more than anyone else. Those who are willing to make mistakes and try new things. So if you have a passion for something, throw yourself at it. And if you have a dream, don't give up on it. No one starts as an expert. It takes time to develop and learn the skills you need. Stick with it. The time flies by. and you'll be there in no time. I hope you enjoyed the video, and be sure to let me know your thoughts down below. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers everyone.